Chapter 33, The Wind Tunnel Experiment by Wim Hof. One day, Maximum TV called me and asked if I was still interested in doing television performances. And since it was the way that I made money, I told them yes. They were happy to hear my response. That's when they started talking about what they wanted to do, the Wind Tunnel Experiment. They had two ideas that they wanted to pursue in this experiment. One of them was to strap me to the outside of a truck driving 80 kilometers per hour, 49.7 miles per hour, in temperatures near freezing. The other idea was to travel to Vienna, where there is a wind tunnel capable of creating winds that are 120 kilometers per hour, 74.5 miles per hour, with the temperature of 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I had never done anything like that before, so I was interested in both of the ideas. I was ready to test my body and mind once again. A couple of weeks later, I flew to Frankfurt, then Munich. There, I met the 27-year-old Dennis. Typically a journalist and a soccer player, Dennis was now going to host the show and join me in the experiment. He was eager to do a good job and give his best. The following morning, 10 of us began our 160-kilometer, 99.4-mile drive from Munich to Memmeken, Germany. Once we arrived, we stopped at a truck company that specialized in airline transport vehicles. One of their vehicles and an ambulance accompanied us to the nearby airport. When we arrived at the airport, the television crew began to set up. The medics checked on us to make sure we were in good condition. They checked our core temperatures, blood pressure, and heart rate. They declared us healthy individuals. The producer's goal was to now strap Dennis and I onto the back of a truck and then drive 80 kilometers per hour, 49.7 miles per hour in the rain at 4 degrees Celsius, 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit. After the final preparations were made, the truck began to move. At 80 kilometers per hour, 49.7 miles per hour, the rain felt like hail as it hit our skin. I was barely clothed while Dennis had the advantage of wearing a raincoat. The combination of rain, cold temperature, and high winds took the heat from my body at a rapid pace. However, it made for a wonderful endurance test. Despite the hail-like rain, we quickly discovered that the extreme stunt was possible to do while remaining somewhat comfortable. Even for an untrained person like Dennis, he was able to maintain his composure and stay energetic. He suggested that maybe it was my presence and advice that gave him the ability to endure the cold. Either way, during those hours we chilled out and had a great time. After many hours of driving, the television crew was finally finished. We packed up our stuff and started driving to Vienna. We stopped 150 kilometers, 93.2 miles short of Vienna. It was late, so we found a quaint hotel to stay in where we quickly fell to sleep. The next morning, we rose at 5 a.m. and quickly got back on the road. Soon after, we arrived at the thermotest facility. It was a huge compound that had the ability to simulate a wind tunnel. When we first entered the building, we noticed an enormous refrigerator. There were pipes 10 meters in diameter covered in insulation feeding the wind tunnel. Using a propeller that is 7 meters high to generate the wind, this facility holds the largest wind tunnel in the world. When the emergency team arrived, which included a doctor and his assistant, we were ready to record. People were running all over the place to try to make all of the necessary preparations. I prepared myself mentally for the test. Eventually, we made our way to the front of the wind tunnel. Normally, the test trains resistance against temperatures from negative 40 degrees Celsius, which is also negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit, to 60 degrees Celsius, which is 140 degrees Fahrenheit. They were also able to simulate rain and snow during these tests to mock the outside environment. They told us that we would be doing the shot with the wind tunnel running at 100 kilometers per hour, 62 miles per hour, at 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Dennis and I got our final checkups from the medics. My heart rate was at 68 beats per minute, while Dennis was at 122 beats per minute. Being that I'm more experienced when it comes to these situations, my heart rate stays relatively low while I'm preparing for the event. Soon enough, the cameras were ready and it was time for the shot. A few moments later, Dennis and I were standing in front of the tunnel and the massive propeller began to spin. The tunnel was 12 meters high, 120 meters long, and controlled by a computer to create any possible weather condition. It was a beautiful sight. Dennis was wearing a jacket, but not me. He was standing a meter behind me. Of course, we were both a little anxious about what was to come because neither of us had experienced anything like it before. We didn't know what to expect. The sound from the propeller became louder. The wind strengthened, and we had to position our feet in a way to prevent us from being knocked over. At 0 degrees Celsius, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and 100 kilometers per hour, 62 mile per hour winds, it felt like a storm. It wasn't comfortable, but we were able to hold our ground, despite the wind stinging our face and sucking the heat from our hands. After 10 minutes into the storm, Dennis had endured all that he could handle. He raised his hand to signal to the crew that he was done. I was running in place and I had become extremely comfortable prior to turning off the propeller, but the first attempt was over and it was time to relax. We went back into a heated room to drink some tea and warm up. After an hour had passed, we were ready to go again. This time, they would turn up the wind speed to 120 kilometers per hour, 74 miles per hour, lower the temperature even more, and add rain into the equation. In the meantime, more shots were taken of our preparations. The television crew worked constantly to acquire as much footage as possible. Time was money, and they had little time to get the right shots. Back at the tunnel, Dennis was now wearing 2 raincoats and waterproof pants, and I was wearing clothes that could easily soak the rain and keep it pressed against my body. We were ready. The cameras began to roll, and we positioned ourselves in the middle of the tunnel. The powerful roar of the propeller came on and drowned out all other sounds. The rainfall came on pretty quick, and by the time the wind speed reached 120 kilometers per hour, 74 miles per hour, I was soaked. I also quickly became aware that it is incredibly difficult to remain balanced in 120 kilometer per hour winds, but I managed to do it somehow. However, now that the wind speed was much faster, the rain felt like hailstones. I was constantly being hit in the face with these rock-like water droplets. Dennis was still having a lot of difficulty with the pain as well. He couldn't stand it. After 4 minutes, Dennis gestured that he was done. When they turned the propeller off, he explained to the crew why he had stopped. Then he returned to the heated room to warm himself back up. My turn. They turned the propeller back on, and the rain began to fall once again. I was able to easily hold my ground from the practice that I had in the last attempt. I was in the zone. I began to tap my heel and sing while the winds approached 120 kilometers per hour, 74 miles per hour. Harder and harder, the winds picked up speed. I continued to go deeper into my song and myself to try to bring out my spirit. After going deeper, I began to sense a presence. I felt like I was not myself. It felt like there is an Indian spirit inside of me. I was singing chants, and I felt connected to the wind. I could identify with it. The cold of the winds didn't bother me anymore. I was in a trance and in total control. I felt like I was facing a great force, but felt no fear or danger. I was facing it with total tranquility. I had never experienced anything like this feeling before. It was incredibly intense. I felt like I was on top of the world. Even my experience on Mount Everest couldn't compare. The camera team was mesmerized, but their cameras continued to roll. The doctor was telling the crew to break off the experiment, but they were all too intrigued by the peace that I was showing. I felt so much imbalance that I raised 1 foot off the ground and was now fighting against 120 kilometer, 74 mile an hour winds, standing only on 1 foot, like a flamingo. Soon after, someone heard the cry of the doctor and signaled to turn off the experiment. They didn't understand that I was perfectly fine, but they broke it off anyway. I felt nothing but greatness. I'd seen the identity of the wind, and the spectators told me that watching the experience had emotionally touched them. Deep down, we all have a part of us that has the ability to connect with the elements of nature. We have the potential to connect with it fully and have our bodies adapt. Indians, who were close to nature, understood this very well and had the wisdom of the land. In civilization, we've lost that ability. Nature has the ability to make us whole, to fulfill us. Therefore, we must strive to become holy.